You go first.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. Do you want to scale or me? Actually.
Oh my god! You know what? I'll scale first. Sure, I will scale first.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that's
Okay.
good
I
because
don't care for physical capabilities like strength, dimensionality, etc., etc. I'm merely going to go into my hacks just because I believe that these hacks aren't bound by a set spatial or temporal dimensionality in question.
are you gonna? Isn't this like the passive like kills your character thing?
It's death. Yes, it is death. Or would you like to argue about if death is bound by a spatial or temporal like axes?
Oh no! I'm not gonna goon. I'm just
Okay.
basically gonna. This is gonna devolve into our like argument last time and stuff, but basically it's just presupposing this ability is bijective to all characters besides
Ob-
first.
okay. I will phrase it like this for you then. All characters. This ability will affect all characters that do not have resistance above what has been shown within my verse.
This character works on everything
I am
besides
saying
resist.
I'm saying if they have not shown resistance or negation towards this ability above what level has been shown within my verse, then it will work against them. The
Um,
potency allows it to beat those set characters unless they show otherwise.
the problem is like I could contend that in two different ways. That shows that there's actually just an
Please
intrinsic
don't contend in two
limitation.
different ways. Just contend it the first way. If that doesn't work or does work, we'll continue on.
Basically, that just means that in virtue, this thing actually has a limit. It doesn't work
Does it
passively for
doesn't
all
entail
characters.
any set? Okay, okay. We have to argue about if anything's like relative or not. Again, we can do that again.
Oh wait, hold on.
I don't.
The
It's
drip
gonna
sauce
end this.
debate.
It's gonna end the same way, but like, sure, we can argue about it again.
The drip sauce debate was asked, so I want to go by turns. Like you take a turn, I take a turn for this.
Elaborate by what you mean by turns. Like you speak, then I speak, or like 5 minutes you speak, then I speak for 5 minutes.
Just when you're done saying whatever you're saying and stuff, then I'll respond.
Okay, sure. What do you have to say?
Okay, well, I mean, I could contend this in two different ways, but the main thing I'm just gonna say is the simpler explanation is that this has a limit, right? Basically, it's just like passive, like death manip or something. It just passively kills your character, like no
I
matter who,
my
right? But then,
apologies.
right? But if there's shown that like this character, right, this said like ability kind of has some limit where if a character presents some type of ability, right, then it won't work and stuff. And so when you're putting this ability bijective, bijective, what I mean by that is basically having like a one-to-one correspondence throughout an infinite set of characters and stuff that just self defeats the knowledge claim, saying that it actually has a limit. So if a character presents an ability, right, that is similar or isomorphic, being not necessarily equal, right, but in virtue like equal, then that poses a limitation to this
Jesus,
ability.
Jesus, take the wheel. Okay, okay. Was that all? I'm sorry, that was a lot. Lex,
Oh
was that
yeah,
all?
sorry, yeah.
Okay, cool. Look, like I said previously, the said limitation in the question, like I don't believe there is. I'm just merely saying that the potency that this ability has shown will be what I will say it can affect to. If your character shows resistance or negation towards the ability to my caliber, we can argue upon if that will actually work against it. If it doesn't, then etc. We will move on from the point in question. It's quite simplistic. Then, in response to that knowledge claim you're talking about, like that was dumb as fuck because we would already assume the ability would work into a countermeasure has been shown. For instance, I'll give you an example. I'll say like if I was shown to punch like a wall, for instance, and then that wall just breaks into smithereens, for example, then actually, no, fuck you. I'm not using an example. This argument is too dumb. Like my first argument in particular already debunked this notion that you already came up with. Just go on and respond to it.
It didn't debunk it. The problem you posed is that Right, so we're presupposing I'm steelmanning the point where this allegedly could affect all characters, right? And stuff like, cool, that's fine, right? But
Okay, let me interject. No, I never said all characters. That's just strawmanning my argument.
you're basically saying all characters except like a character that has shown some type of ability that would negate this, right?
That has shown a resistance or negation towards ability similar to mine. Yes, it's quite
Okay.
simplistic.
Okay. Cool. So my character has that
Has what?
whatever resistance against it.
In what way? What way do they like potentially quote unquote resist it?
Um basically, would you say that a character allegedly can do anything? Then that means that they could basically utilize the what's it called, ability that negates that against
No,
your opponent,
anything's
or
relative. I don't think anything is like quite literally just an objective notion between all realities. It's just relative to the said thing in question.
anything is relative to said thing in question?
For the situation or example in question, yes. Anything subjective.
I'm sorry. I don't really know what that means. Could
As
you explain it in a different way, possibly?
okay, so anything refers to everything, right? Correct.
Mhm.
Okay. Now everything in a notion is still contingent upon what that said thing is in question. For instance, a universe isn't just it's a collection of celestial bodies, yes.
Yeah, go on.
Yes, Lex. Okay.
Yeah, go on.
I think I think I heard you say true. Okay. Now we obviously know Dragon Ball Z's universe and then like Human Neko's universe aren't the same, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That proves that a universe itself is also not just an objective notion that it's a collection of celestial bodies, but instead it's a collection of said things that make up the said fabric of what reality is based upon in those said realities in question. Basically, it can still be the said thing in question, but they can have different properties or components that make it so they're completely different in nature.
If I understand this correctly, by extension, that means we just can't have a versus battle then.
We for sure can. It's just based upon what our versus battle is comparing two different characters' capabilities and seeing which one will be put over the other one via those capabilities shown. So if your universe just so happens to be smaller than my universe and we're scaling each other off for each other's universes, then my character would win based upon those notions we've already prescribed upon them. The capabilities that we've shown that they can produce will be our reasoning upon why they beat the other character. It's quite simplistic. That's how like all versus battle works.
I feel like that self defeats your argument, though.
Can you elaborate?
If I understood correctly, you said a lot. Basically, you're saying that the prescribed attributes of a said like fictional verse is inherently subjective. For example, you brought up the Umi Neko versus Dragon Ball verse, right? They both have a universe, right? Everyone exists, coexists within this universe, right? But the fundamental mechanics are intrinsically different, right? So I think you're trying to like correlate this known fact, allegedly, to how if this character might present something that is isomorphic, meaning like not necessarily equal, but equal in virtue, like seemingly the same, right? Then it doesn't actually necessarily hold any analytical truth by nature, since they're simply just based off of separate mechanics and transcribed notions an author presented. But the problem is then you went and go on and, or sorry, you went on to say how basically it does work because it's a fictional battle, right? We're taking our characters' set attributes and abilities and we're comparing them with each other, right? And we're using our linguistics to determine, you know, these words and what they value and how they favor each other's weighted kind of attributes, I guess, which is a contradiction because if we're using two different characters from hypothetical verses and comparing their set abilities, right? That's an implication that these abilities or attributes or mechanics of their verses conflate with each other, which kind of contradicts your own argument that it's ultimately subjective in nature, that these things just don't have any objective correlation to one another.
Okay, so maybe no, you definitely don't understand. Look, it's quite basic. They get to the same conclusion, like for abilities, for instance, reality manipulation. It falls under a big ass area of things that can, technically speaking, be able to be considered reality manipulation. It's basically like 1 plus 2 equals 3, but then you use 5 minus 2 to equal 3. They both came to the same conclusion, but in different ways. For instance, if we talk about ki, it's basically the manipulation of the universal energy within Dragon Ball Z. But we talk about like red truths of Yumeneko or in Masada creation figments. It's the energy of the universe slash magic that they use to basically get across the same thing. The manipulation of reality around them or surrounding the said things in question. It's quite simplistic. You're using different notions to reach the same abilities or can reach the same abilities with same conclusions, but different ways to reach said conclusions in particular. It's really similar to the fact that if I cross the street, I can go in a straight line or I can go at a 90-degree angle and then proceed to go another 90-degree angle towards that said direction and still reach the end point. We used two different ways, but we still got to the same conclusion or same area that we were leading to in the first place. And then to address the first thing you were talking about with like this all being subjective, like, yeah, it's all subjective. We just apply it to a tiering system so we're able to understand where this thing said thing will scale to in terms of strength or capabilities. For instance, we would agree that a box isn't necessarily anything that's universal or anything like that intrinsically, right? Like we just assume that it's a box, it's three-dimensional, etc., etc. We change this notion when we find out more characteristics or properties of the said box in question. Like fragments in human echo. Typically, if you think of a fragment, you would think a fragment of glass and not a fragment of a possible fucking world. It's just subjective based upon the said universe in question, how the author wants to write the said notion of the said reality in question. It's quite simple. Like this argument's really dumb. We can go to conclusions.
Can I respond? Right,
Okay.
can I respond?
Oh, sure. Go for it.
Okay. So I'm just gonna mainly like you brought up a lot of analogies. The one
It
that
was
I
three.
think okay. Anyways, I'm gonna just like bring up how you said like 1 plus 1 could equal 3, right? Within one verse, and 5 minus 2 could equal 3 in another verse. They both arrive at the
That's
same
not what I
conclusion.
said. I'm just saying that they would lead to the same conclusion, but different ways of getting there. It's very simple. Like you
Um,
wouldn't like you wouldn't say that 3 plus 2 equals 5 is the only way to get 5, right?
I think that's just like that's using abductive reasoning. That's not true, I'm pretty sure. Because like you're saying, like, okay, well, if these things both arrive at the same conclusion, then we're gonna let's just say that we're gonna call these separate abilities like X and Y. X and Y both arrive at the same conclusion, right? So we can compare X and Y, right, and stuff. But if X and Y are fundamentally different, and stuff, right? And they arrive at the same conclusion. I just feel like that's a little bit of a contradiction saying that if X and Y are both like separate things, right? Yet they arrive at the same conclusion, right? Then in some virtuous aspect, then X and Y are somewhat comparable when X and Y are intrinsically different. But I get what you're saying, how basically like so we have like different mechanics of like separate verses, right? And they run differently, sure, but they both like arrive at a similar conclusion on what we could dub reality manipulation. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't want to get into like meta debating and stuff, right? Behind like the like semantical values of what of the agents that are presented within one verse, each respective verse. I feel like that's a waste of time, but I just feel like your analogy was just kind of like contradictory in virtue and stuff, but also in relation to your own premise and stuff. When I basically attacked that by saying, okay, allegedly, like this isn't going to be my character. Well, I'm not going to say that this is my character's scaling, but if this character can do anything, right? and your said opponents are, yeah, like this character, your Nagaro or whatever character you're using, they're like passive like death manipulation, right? If it has like some type of contingency such that it'll work if the opposing opponent does not present this ability, right? And stuff. And if I say like, okay, well, if my character can do like anything, right, then it'll just simply pick that thing in which it just negates your ability, right? And I don't see how that just compares to your own interpretation about how these have different mechanics intrinsically, right? But we can conflate them in virtue, because that's basically saying like, okay, well, then this like contingency or like the death manipulation resistance in this verse is not same as your verse, right? And stuff. So like mine would still affect yours, right? But going off your notion that right X and Y may be intrinsically different, yet they both arrive at the same conclusion, that in itself is a contradiction, because while these two things may be seemingly indifferent, right, yet they both, using our semantical agents, they both arrive at the same conclusion that would give a resistance to death manipulation. I said a lot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, look, Lex, like that was a lot of jargon. I'm gonna be honest with you, gang. Like the first thing about when you attacked one of my examples or like one of my analogies, saying that it's basically what was your exact phrasing? I'm sorry, I would prefer not to strawman you.
I don't really remember. Can you try and paraphrase and then I can correct you?
Okay, you basically said like uh you're comparing X and Y and saying that they have similar properties, and then the endpoint would be what was it?
Different
It was a lot.
properties.
There was a lot of jargon. I'll be honest with you, gang. Like I wasn't like fully listening at a certain point.
Um, I don't want to push conclusions on this. That'd be really ratty and stuff.
No, we can for sure push conclusions. I don't think anything you said like debunked my notions at all.
Sure. Okay.
Okay, I don't even think we need conclusions for real. Like I think it's like very clear I
Sure.
won this.
Okay. Judge can give his judgment.
Okay, Ichi, what you think?
I'm gonna be real. Swayz, Loki, he slapped the fuck out of the argument. It was bad. Like that was horrible. So, Pete, this right? You yourself agreed that his character, his death manipulation will be unbound by spatio-temporality, right? Then you go into this weird resistance point about whether your character would be able to resist the other character's hacks, even though you yourself agreed that his hacks would be on this like extremely high level that's like beyond most like forms of perception. You have to go into like way more detail about said resistance, because Swayze himself goes onto this point by saying that his character can perform his hacks on any level on anyone in the verse, or at least as far as the verse extends to. And then you don't actually provide any like good contention to this, besides bringing up this weird fundamental point, which doesn't actually like go against it at all. You just say, oh yeah, my character has a resistance to it. Like I don't think that actually goes against the notion at all. Anyway.
What?
Bro. What's up?
I don't think he interpreted his point that well.
No. He literally says this at the start. Like, don't lie now. He literally says at the start, and you agreed to it. You said, oh yeah, I'm fine with death being on this level. You literally agreed to it. So you just saying, yeah, my character would resist this death. That doesn't really like give enough extrapolation upon that. You have to show like way more evidence, because you're like forming a hasty generalization, because you're not actually showing enough evidence for Sway's claim. Like his level of death hacks is like on this extreme high level. Like just saying you resist it isn't enough.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I'm not actually like gonna bring up I didn't bring up any scaling for my character. I specified that.
Yeah. So that point was kind of like irrelevant, because you yourself like uncontested agrees with his death hacks being like beyond spatial temporality, and I think he went into other things on this, but that's like the main point there. Like you just saying you resist isn't like enough. You need more extrapolation.
Ichi, are you saying that like he won because I didn't scale my character?
I
No,
mean, that's one of the things, but it's also because like you saying you resist it is just not enough. That's just one of the things. There's like multiple things you'd have to do. You like just scaling your character. Let's say you did scale your character to like 5D during the debate. That still wouldn't be enough because of just you agreeing to that point. Like you yourself put you at a dead end after you agreed to like what Swayz said at the start. Like that was retarded. You should have went against the spatial temporality thing, because that puts his character at like a really high level, and it's hard to like prove your character can resist that just by like going into like a fundamental point. Like you can't, like it just doesn't work that way. I think you'd apply Sagan's standard to that, if I'm right. That's the razor.
What? No. I'm not going to be a rat and just like take an agnostic stance, you know, like, okay, we'll prove that. Passive death manipulation, death is inherently conceptual, right? So it doesn't actually work on things that are like.
Not well. You know, that's a topic for
Okay.
another day.
So yeah, that's a different topic for another. Like Swayz, he doesn't know the scaling. He doesn't know. But there's like you should have just like you should have went against that point, because you know death manipulation. How do I put this? Death manipulation, it can like define a lot of things. Like let's say you have an ability that makes your opponent's heart stops. That does qualify as death manipulation, by the way. You should have went against the point and told him to extrapolate on how it works, or like at what level it works, because you can't just automatically presuppose that it is conceptual. That's kind of weird.
His claim is saying that it just passively kills any characters.
Yeah, passively killing a character. It doesn't like that doesn't place it at a conceptual level. That's the problem. Like he made like these like extreme amounts of extraordinary claims about his death, and you just accept it. Like that's not it. So who the fuck is paying me?
Okay.
Lex, if you think you have any, Lex, if you think you have like any abilities that like resist this, other than the anything he can do anything thing that like kind of fell through, you can state it.
Ichi, buddy. I just like really strongly disagree with your judgment. Like when we're entering a dialectic, right? He's scaling his character verse. I'm not just gonna bring up my character scaling during the debate while he's trying to like prove this character has a set ability.
Ichi's not saying that you were doing that. He's just simply saying you agree to a lot of things you really fucking should have without any evidence. Because I didn't send a single scan actually.
Literally did not send a scan. Okay, so Swayz, his first thing about his character, he says, "Oh yeah, my character beats
just
yours."
Conclude your master. Everyone just conclude your master. The best debater in you.
Oh.
And anyways, continue. Yeah.
As I was saying, so Swayz, his first point, he literally says this. He says, "Oh yeah, I think my character would kill yours because he has this past death manipulation that's beyond spatial temporality, and he like bypasses like these resistances. He makes a lot of claims, and then you said, are you fine with death being beyond spatial temporality and like the things he lists?" And you just go along with it. By the way, you go along with it. Like, like I don't know why you did that.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not gonna rat. Death is conceptual. Anyways,
it's not.
Oh my god.
Okay, Lex. Like, there's a lot of different ways to like. Remember the reality manipulation point of mine?
Can I say something
it
real quick? I just want to talk about the structure of this debate real quick. Why I like strongly disagree with your judgment. I don't have to bring up any scaling for my character, right? That doesn't prove that if I didn't bring up any scaling or any type of like feat or attribute of my character that directly combats that, then this is true. What I'm doing is I'm putting into question if this holds any analytical truth or any truth that we can decide that this actually.
Nigga, stop jargoning. Put that in simple terms.
Okay.
I'm basically putting this. I'm putting this ability into question, whether it's actually even true or valid or not, right? I don't have to bring in my character scaling, right? If I debunk that argument that this character can allegedly do this thing, right, then I don't need to bring in my character scaling, because if I
But you
showed,
see, like I would agree with you, right? But like Wex, in this situation, you didn't even do that. All you did was hear that my ability is passive and functions above an atemporal and aspatial level, and you said, "Well, my character has a resistance against it," and then you went on to say your character can do anything, and that's what created this argument we had previously. You see, you didn't
I
even
use that.
contend. What?
So sorry. I use that as an example. I explicitly said like this like may or may not be the scaling I may use for my character, but say allegedly a character had like the ability to do anything, right?
That's not what you said.
Anything. I'm pretty sure I explicitly made sure that I did not say that this was going to be my character's argument.
Okay, sure. Let's say you didn't use that, and it was just hypothetical this whole time. That would okay. So if we're gonna go with that notion, you want to go with that idea, which I don't mind. Like either way, it doesn't like really change anything. Then we agree that just because a character state to manipulate anything or absolutes, etc., it's relative to the said verse in question. I think I won that point.
Um, Okay, the problem is that I showed a contradiction within this dialect we had, right? You're basing this off of how like, okay, well, two separate verses, they may have like intrinsically different mechanics, right? X and Y are intrinsically different, right? But they satisfy or they arrive at a similar conclusion, and we can conflate those conclusions, right, with each respective verse. That's fine and stuff, right? But when you're predicating your argument based off of how this character, right, there isn't evidence, right? Or basically what you're saying, you're predicating your argument how there doesn't exist evidence or any indication that since my character does not exist within your verse, right, this doesn't actually indicate any type of equal type of resistance to this death manipulation in virtue, right? And so it wouldn't satisfy at a similar conclusion, which contradicts your earlier claim that if two things are intrinsically different due to the separate respective mechanics, if they arrive at a specific conclusion in which we can conflate that conclusion, that's a contradiction in your own argument. That's
You're
what I'm getting
okay.
at.
You're misunderstanding completely. I'm saying right. You can have two abilities, but they function completely separately. Or differently. I'm sorry, not separately, differently. Like reality manipulation, or the like 2 plus 3 example that equals 5, or the 1 plus 2 that equals 3. They're the same way to get to the same conclusion of a set thing in question, but there's different ways of going about it. Like the death manipulation thing Ichi brought up in his explanation of who he thought won. Sure, death manipulation can be conceptual, yes, but it's not by nature. It's always gonna be like, this conceptual thing. It can be simply me touching you and your heart stops. It could be me just simply breathing around you or having a miasma around me that induces your death. Like there's tons of different ways for said thing to be considered death manipulation, quote unquote. And in this situation, it's quite simple. Your resistance, quote unquote, that you bring up in relation to anything is just relative. And that's why I'm saying this ability functions on a said level that has been shown within my verse, and you cannot do anything unless you've shown higher levels of resistance or negation to abilities similar to mine.
You said it was passive though, so how would there indicate any type of physicality?
Well, oh my lord, that was the example of death manipulation.
Right, but you said it was passive, so I was just going by that. It wouldn't require any type of physicality.
Hold up.
Jesus Christ,
Yo,
Ichi.
Swayz, I got you. Hold up. So, do you think a passive ability can't be physical?
Hence the word passive.
Okay, I think a passive thing is something that happens just like automatically, like on the spot. It just happens on its own.
Like Wex, for example, what are you currently doing when you're like not speaking to me or not speaking at all? What function in your body is happening?
Cool. I know what you're going to say. You're basically saying if I give an example such that like I'm passively pumping blood, right? That's not under my own control, right? The thing is that if your character has an injective property, I'm going to define that having a one-to-one property where this is passively killing your character, right? Then that means that that does not indicate any type of physicality unless you're presupposing that your character isn't sentient.
Oh my lord! Wow, that was a weird way to take passiveness. Okay, passiveness is just simply the notion that it doesn't need activation or conscious action to do. Like for instance, the question that you Dajai asked was particularly about breathing. You're currently breathing. For example, if you were to go like to sleep right now, or like karate chop you in your neck and you just fell asleep on some instant death type shit or whatever, you would just simply start breathing while you're asleep. You wouldn't need conscious action or anything. In this situation, I'm merely just relaying the fact that it's not necessarily the fact that it's passive that makes it non-physical. It's just the notion that a passibility is just simply something that doesn't need activation from the user in particular. It's just something that happens without them knowing or needing to know about it. Doesn't intrinsically like hold a like value that it has to be a non-physical or physical interaction with a said person in question.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Actually, you know, honestly, like that's actually a pretty fair example. Honestly, yeah, it's pretty fair to think about that. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a pretty good example.
Thank you. So,
To think about.
do you
Yeah.
have any like abilities that you think can negate mine, or do you want me to use a different character? Like I don't mind.
Sure. I have one thing. The problem is like, well, oh god. Okay.
It
Problem
over
is
or
like you're kind of good, and so I'm just gonna. This is just kind of like this is gonna be hard to go against someone who's already decent. All right. Refer to text debates too.
oh my god. Don't rat
Tom,
against me.
Okay.
Tomiki, I'm
Okay.
always calm. It's just that ET brings out a different side of me that like actually pisses me off sometimes.
Okay. Um, text debates too. So, are you familiar with what apophatic theology is?
Isn't that like it can only be described in negative terms?
Yep. Pretty much.
Like unknowable, like unseeable, like etc. etc.
Basically, that this character, I'm basically arguing what the two scans present is that this character is just basically outscales your character by virtue. They're basically apophatic or just like character, in terms of their characteristics, theirs is simply ineffable, meaning that they just completely transcend any conceptualization that we can make in relation to the characteristics of said character, right? And anything that would be a conceptualization or a positive claim to just simply would not apply and stuff.
Yeah, I'll just say my character
Is this
doesn't care about any of that.
okay? So you're
Like,
fine with that?
sure, you can have that.
Okay, cool. So my character just simply transcends the concept of death manipulation. GG's.
That's okay. Okay, so my ability functions over beings that are beyond death. So like I give a fuck.
So this, yeah. So that's just okay. Okay. Here's
Okay,
the problem with that. If okay,
sure.
so you're saying that this character allegedly could transcend something that is so transcendental that there cannot be a described limit on it. Basically, you're saying that this is transcendental to something that is completely ineffable when your character in virtue has qualitative descriptions of it, something that is simply qualitative, going above something that can only be attained through negative theology, simply ineffable, so transcendental that they cannot be described, would be an inherent contradiction.
Yeah, I'll just say that's relative to your said verse in question. That's the same argument, just saying relatively. It's just the same thing in your verse. That's completely fine. My character's already showcased that he can negate beings that are beyond conceptions, or have an aura that denies very conceptions itself. It doesn't matter. You're not special, nigga.
What? Okay. So, okay. I'm just okay. I already said this, but I'm just gonna say it one more time.
Sure, maybe I
Going off of
misheard.
your definition, right? If both verses have X and Y, right, yet they satisfy a conclusion, maybe they're intrinsically different, right? Yet they satisfy a conclusion in which we can use that agent to conflate the ability with each respective verse, then if you conceded to the point that this character is simply ineffable by virtue in this hypothetical versus battle, then this character would just simply transcend any conceptualization in relation to this character. So it would just transcend the concept your character is predicated on.
I disagree. It will just transcend the very conception that's based upon the said verse. We're doing the selective battle in question, just merely putting our character, whatever state we have them in, and applying them into our crossword setting. The said things that are beyond the very conception of the thing that is beyond the conception is just merely beyond the conceptions within the said verse, not the ones inside the crossword setting that we place their characters in. Same thing that applies with other fictions with their said power systems, etc., etc. For instance, you want to say Austin could deny all conceptions of power just simply because his said magic system or system of power is magic, and then applying that situation towards the said crossword setting in particular. All I'm merely saying is that your conception of death is different from mine, or it can be different. It's like, it goes back to my example of the universes. Both our characters may have concept or like conceptions of death or a concept manipulation of death in their said verse. So they can be intrinsically different. Like, for instance, you wouldn't say that because you destroyed the Dragon Ball Z universe means that you scaled to a being that destroyed the Human Echo universe, would you?
No, but we can
Oh, okay,
use
okay,
that
hold that
being
thought.
as
Hold
a
on. That's all I
universal.
needed. That's all I needed. That's all I completely needed. Both of them
No,
destroyed universe. I wasn't finished. They both destroy universal constructs, but those said constructs in particular aren't pertaining to the typical constructs. They both have their
okay.
own value and intrinsic values.
I see what you're
That's literally all my argument is. It's literally all it is.
Okay, cool. So the problem with that is that's just presupposing that X and Y have alternate axiological values. What I mean by that is that their value differs from each other. One may be greater or less than, right? But that just simply like it just contradicts your initial argument that even if X and Y are intrinsically different, right? Yet we use those results to use their said agents to conflate, right, what has been shown in a hypothetical versus battle so we can scale our characters, right? Like it's just completely like it just completely contradicts everything you said, because I could just say that about your character, that your character's concept of death is alternate to mine within my said verse and stuff, so we can't even compare them because the concept of death meaning just being a semantical agent, death could just mean the concept of life, so that just doesn't apply to my verse, for example.
Okay. Is that all? I don't want
Yeah,
to cut
go
you
ahead.
off. Okay. So, in relation to what you just said, like, that was just kind of ridiculous. Yes, my argument's staying the same. No, it's not contradictory at all. It's still relative to the said situation, unless you're trying to apply the fact that it's the typical norms of the concept of death. My concept of death is completely different from other verses, or particularly most, and I say most verses, because maybe there's a verse out there with the same particular system. I highly doubt, but it is a possibility, so I'm not going to dispute it. I'm merely saying that our definitions of death within our verses isn't necessarily the same. This is showcased by my character being able to kill beings that are beyond the very concept of death, which should include all the accumulations of ideas of death, but he's still able to kill that said character in question. For
Yeah,
another
pretty bad.
example within my said verse, excuse me,
Sorry.
was that towards me?
Sorry. You can keep going. Sorry.
Okay. Another example of this is when my character was able to kill off the limbs of a character that's very aura could deny conceptions itself. Obviously, we would already conclude to the fact that typically, right, a character, like an inanimate object, for instance, like you would say you couldn't typically kill a chair, right? Lexi,
Yo, what's up?
like you would agree you can't typically kill an inanimate object, correct?
In fiction or just like in real life?
Just typically, like you couldn't kill an inanimate object.
I'm not going to respond to that.
That's fine. So I'll just say in relation to that typically speaking, in order to cause death, there has to be life, correct?
In order to cause death, there would be life, since entropy is contingent on life. In a general notion within our world, yeah, you could say that.
Yeah. Basically, just shortening in like less jargon terms than what you just said. typically speaking, yes, there has to be life in order for death to be caused. But in fiction and other fictions, people are able to kill inanimate objects like chairs, doors, souls, concepts, people beyond concepts, etc., etc. This is just merely different conceptions or accumulation of ideas of death within the said verses in question. I'm merely saying with the accumulation of ideas within my verse of death and beyond it that my character can access, it will deny the very thing that you're trying to prescribe upon the situation that's occurring.
Yeah, it doesn't just.
Unless,
True.
hold on, my fault.
Sorry.
I forgot to add this a little bit. Unless you can show your ability function on the same capacity of mine, but like my ability of death is the typical definition of instant death. It negates resistances, negations, etc., etc.
It negates negations.
Yeah, like if you try to negate it in any type of way, or like let's like a character had a field or like whatever, like he tried to like killing my character just by shooting something randomly around him, right? Not trying to kill him in particular, just shooting around him, and he still died. Like even things that like try to not to explicitly kill my character, it will still get you killed. It doesn't matter if it's a conscious or unconscious action; it will still cause death in a way.
Okay, so if we have different terms of what death even means, right, and my character transcends the concept of death, how can you prove that your character and their own concept of death holds any veridical value over mine?
Because
We're
my
both using
person,
this.
okay,
Yeah.
to answer your question, because my character has killed beings that very or denies conception itself, not just concept or a conception question like one or two, conception itself, the very idea of abstractions.
Okay.
So we
cool,
already
but,
know
like,
my ability. So we already know my ability functions above a beyond conceptual level, even if we disregard the notion that my character killed a being that's beyond the concept of death. So your argument's pretty dumb unless you can show your character functioning above all conceptions as well, which it doesn't seem like you can because your character's still bounded by a set thing in question being a negative and a positive claim.
Okay, cool. So basically, my the idea of a conception is different in my verse, so it doesn't apply.
Different how? And tell me why the difference would make a difference in this debate.
Because it's a different verse inherently, right? These things are predicated on the author's
Making the
imagination.
question.
Yeah, so these, I'm just going by your logic, since basically X and Y verses are inherently different, their mechanics are different, right? Then that suggests that concepts within them could be different, right? So I'm just using that logic against you that
No, you're
just
straw
the
manning
idea
me.
of a concept. The idea of a concept would just be simply different in mine.
No, you're straw manning me because I'm not saying they possibly can be different as my justification for my ability of functioning. I'm saying that mine is different from other verses. It's not just a possibility; it's just an actuality. There's a difference. So you can get out here straw manning me. Like you really thought you ate with that shit. I don't know what to say about that.
But you basically okay. So when I gave my argument that my character is apophatic in virtue and stuff, right? And that means that they're just simply ineffable, right? And then you said, okay, well that just doesn't apply because that could only just mean like ineffable relative to your own verse and stuff, right? But using that logic against you, your character, right, can only kill characters that are bound by what entails a conception within your own verse. It doesn't work. It's contradictory when you're saying that we have to conflate a versus battle when they arrive at similar results. We're both speaking the same English language. Fiction is predicated on semantical or linguistic precision. And so unless you can argue, right, that this just originates from something that is just like different in virtue semantically, right? That these just have completely different meanings, then that suggests that everything you've read, there might be a possibility that none of it's even true, which goes into meta debating. So it's terrible. It's terrible. Like,
Okay, Wex. Like that ain't say shit for real. But like I'm gonna respond one more time to like the new thing you brought up, and then we can go to conclusions. Cause like I feel like I could like just drag you around the neighborhood with this shit. But to respond to like the only new argument about like our said things, just actually it wasn't even a new argument for real. But I'll respond to it one more time. Cause like why the fuck not? Look, all I'm saying is that yes, your character's inevitable. Like whatever the phrasing is, I'm sorry, my tongue's like all dry and shit. It doesn't really matter because it's relative to your said verse in question. You're merely applying them to this cross-verse setting. It's the same with my said character in his verse. We're just merely dragging them out their own verse by their fucking hair top and then putting them in this cross-verse setting and basically saying, fight little niggas. That's all we're doing. It's quite simplistic in nature. And then to attack the said thing in question that you said at the last, like, what the hell? Like, that doesn't really matter towards the situation at all. We're doing is applying our own characteristics of our characters to the situation and just seeing who just wins. That's all a versus battle is, all it ever will be probably. I don't really need to attack anything. Like I've already attacked all these arguments. Like every argument you brought up, my first arguments in this point was already debunking. We can go to we don't even need conclusions. We can just get the judge.
Can I respond real quick?
Did I make a new?
This,
Did I
this
make a new?
point is
I
so retarded.
don't think I made a new argument. Where are you responding to?
No, I'm just responding to whatever you said. Right. So that
I
basically
didn't make a
means
new.
that
I
we
didn't
have.
make a new argument. We can go to conclusions.
No. I just have to respond to what you said because I don't think you're understanding. Right.
Oh,
When you're
okay.
saying
If you
that.
think, hold on. If you think I'm not understanding, then the judge will also agree with that notion.
No, I don't. We're not going to conclusions. There's still stuff to say. But anyways,
What is there else to say? What we've all like. I think. Do you think you won
give
this?
me a chance.
I'm not
And
gonna
let me-
lie, you're going circular and shit. Like it's just bad.
Like Lex, do you
I-
think you
I-
won this point?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, we will go to. We will just get judgment then, because I also think I dragged you through the mud.
Say this,
Okay.
bro.
All right. Do you want to say your conclusion?
No, I don't need conclusions. I think it's very clear I won this like no different as well again.
Okay. Cool. I'll just basically give a conclusion.
Oh my
Don't mind.
god.
Okay. So basically,
No,
he
let him go.
conceded.
Let him go.
He conceded to my point by saying my character in Virtue is apophatic. He's fine with that. My character is simply beyond any conceptualization we make of this character. He said, yeah, it doesn't apply because that's only relative to its own verse and stuff, which is contradictory to his initial statement saying, sure, okay, they could have different internal mechanics intrinsically, right? Yeah, but they still yield similar, if not equal results. That's the only way we can conflate two characters in a versus battle, right? And
That's
so
not what
I'm
I
just
said. You're
That's
applying that in the wrong way.
Can I continue, please?
I mean, if you don't strawman my argument, sure, but like continue.
I'm pretty sure that's what you said. But anyways, I'm going on, right? And he basically said, like, okay, well, we have these two characters, right? It doesn't mean like, okay, well, my character, yeah, he talked about his character again about it having like absolute like death manip and stuff. It transcends the concept of death or whatever, allegedly, right? He said like it just kills characters, right? Maybe that are beyond concepts, right? Okay, cool. Well, then I use his own logic against him by saying, okay, well, the interpretation of what entails a concept, right, is different in my verse. This is why we were heading into meta debating and stuff. And he said, like, well, that doesn't apply. It does, because that's what his whole argument was predicated on, right? I then responded that by saying, unless you can prove that the value in which the characters or scans of your verse are simply indifferent to mine, basically they hold some alternate semantical agent, something different completely than the English or Japanese language, whatever, right? Then that just raises the possibility that anything you're reading may not hold any veridical truth, which is why we have to be precise about our linguistics. That's the only way we can conflate things. The word the in Virtue could mean something alternately different, meaning that you could just be strawmanning the entire verse in what you're saying. So when you're conceding to my point that my character is apophatic by virtue and stuff, and saying that this only applies to this verse, completely defeats any argument you've said. That just raises into modal collapse about there being a possibility for characters to fight each other within other verses, and just raises the question of whether we're on similar linguistic frameworks. Hence, since we're discussing the English language, our arguments are derived from scans in which they are derived from the English or Japanese language. Translated, we use those to conflate those attributes with their respective verses. Since my character is apophatic in Virtue, you cannot apply any positive description of it because it would be so transcendental to that. My character would just simply transcend, right, the concept of death itself. It would transcend the concept of death itself. It's that simple. He's
No.
apathetic. GG's.
Can you stop now? Are you done? Shit. God.
Go
Oh
ahead.
my God. I think I went on a tangent. Shit. Talk for like 30 years. Okay. So your concept of death apathetic point, it did not counter like Sway's point at all. I'll tell you why. Because first off, you're presupposing that Sway's concept of death and your concept of death would be like on the same level, which you yourself put yourself in a dead end by saying that, oh yeah, our concepts will be fundamentally different. And then Sway's himself defines what level his concept is at, right? He says that, oh yeah, my level of death works on a level that's beyond all conception, or his concept of death is at that level. And then you say your character is apathetic and transcends the concept of death. But the concept of death, you never define what it is in your terms. So if both concepts of death are completely different and like fundamentally not the same, then you yourself would have to define what your concept of death would be at and what level it would perform at, which you don't do. You just say, oh yeah, it's beyond, it's contextually and linguistically beyond the concept of death, which isn't enough extrapolation upon this, because Swayze's concept of death has been shown beyond all conception itself, which you yourself agree that linguistically they're using the same language. So if you're using the same language here, then beyond all conception would apply to like most concepts within the language, while your only scale for your concept would just be beyond death or whatever apathetic is in this context. So it's just not enough to go against Sway's point at all.
Oh man. See, this is what I'm saying, man. I gotta start picking the judges for real.
Can you say, okay, before you say it, can you explain what was wrong with his reasoning?
Yeah, so basically, okay, so you just like raised a contradiction in your own reading within your verdict, right? You basically admitted that we're both basing our arguments off of a similar linguistic framework, right? We are interpreting. One sec.
Swayze, I don't know if he knows how to scale or not.
Look, I don't know how you argue that like you said, he said they're fundamentally different, and then proceed to say
if they're
like,
fundamentally different and you scale yours to a certain level, then he'd have to scale his concept to a certain level because you agree that they're fundamentally different. Like, it's what?
Okay. Cool. Right. And so I said, okay, well then that could just mean like the definition or the denotation of concepts itself, right? My verse would be respectively different. Sure. Okay. Then that just leads to modal collapse. That means that implies that there cannot be a possibility in which we can conflate these two respective verses simply because we cannot scale them anywhere without there
yes,
being
we can. Oh my God.
What?
Right.
What?
Okay, hold
Yeah.
on.
I was about to start yelling. I was bad.
Okay, Wex. Yes, we can. We can
know.
conflate them at different levels because, for instance, what the universe is saying, we said.
No. You left the VC. Shut up, nigga. No, don't continue. You left the VC. Nah, Swayze. After he said that last line, I was gonna start yelling at him. I'm not even gonna lie. It was gonna be bad. That was so retarded. Like, that was bad. There's no way that this dude put himself in a dead end. So he tries to argue against your point by saying the concepts are fundamentally different, and then you scale your concept, and he like goes circular by saying he's apathetic again, and only says that, oh yeah, his concept of death is only beyond the concept of death. Like what? I don't see a problem with my reasoning.
There was really no problem with it. Like, at least none that he gave for real. That wasn't like kind of dumb as hell. I'm gonna be honest, gang.
What, Tamaki? Dog, I don't think he knows how to scale. I'm not even gonna lie. Hold up.
And this was the nigga that niggas were saying were beyond me.
I don't think he's that good from what I heard. He was just using a bunch of good, like some of the points. It was like jargon. I couldn't understand like one word or two, but I just used context clues.
Most of that shit was jargon. Like me, bro. I'm gonna be so honest, bro. Like most of that shit, I was like, okay, what the fuck does this mean? Then I just had to listen to the way that he used it.
I just put it together in context clues. I was like, hold on, let me use context clues.
Oh my
yeah, you
God.
can do the recording. Yeah, I just put it together with context clues because I don't think what he said was like it wasn't like big enough
Yes.
word where it's just like it just fucks up the point if I don't know the word. Yeah,
Yeah,
his reasoning
yeah,
was wrong. He like blatantly lost the first point.